I don't blame you. A lot of people, when they think of ESG, they only see the E part of ESG. They forget about the S and the G sometimes.
What is ESG actually?
I think many people know stands for environmental, social, and governance factors.
Dr. Kevin Ho is a medical doctor by profession, business strategist by nature. Currently working as manager in the ESG compliance division at iChem Solution. He work on the E of ESG of their clients and patrons. Been on TV to discuss the importance of ESG to SME companies and how SMEs can integrate ESG principles into their business model and operations.
Medical field ni
Itu memang topik best tu. Bersama saya Dr. Roland Victor.
satu benda yang and one of the worst stress can happen bila you makan tak sedap.
Doktor, saya punya culture kena makan nasi.
Zaman moden.
That every second of your life you either earn or learn.
Batu Medic Show. Episod kali ini dibawakan khas oleh Wellcare. Wellcare merupakan suplemen kesihatan yang berasal daripada Kanada. Antaranya yang menarik ialah Wellcare mempunyai suplemen-suplemen yang ada mixture ataupun kombinasi yang menarik. Antara yang ni CoQ10 100 mg dan juga vitamin B6 dan juga B12. So kebanyakan orang yang ada rasa keletihan, kurang bertenaga, tak ada semangat, CoQ10, B6 dengan B12 kita boleh gunakan. Selain CoQ10 dengan B6 dengan B12, ada juga suplemen-suplemen lain seperti multivitamin B complex, omega 3, well boost untuk masalah seperti yang kekurangan zinc, vitamin C dan vitamin D, dan juga flex formula tablets yang mempunyai kalsium, magnesium, zinc dan juga vitamin D. Semua suplemen Wellcare ni boleh didapati di farmasi-farmasi berhampiran anda ataupun pergi kepada link di bawah untuk tahu tentang produk-produk Wellcare. What's up everyone and selamat datang ke another episode of Lesung Batu Medic Show bersama saya Dr. Roland. Dan today topik kita ialah ESG, Environmental, Social and Governance. Memang ramai orang pernah dengar perkataan ni, you have heard this before and you akan fikirkan ni benda World Economic Forum, tapi bukan. Kita hari ni bertuah bersama saya Dr. Kevin Ho. Dr. Kevin, welcome to Lesung Batu Medic Show. You are a medical doctor that has jumped into another segment of medicine,
Right.
which is now going into the environment.
Right.
And tell us what you do at iChem Solution as a medical doctor.
Right. So I made the jump from medical to something totally different. I don't use my medical know-how in my current job. So my current job, iChem Solution, we are a chemical company focused on 3 core business segments. The first, we handle boiler systems, the water. We provide water specialist solutions for boiler systems, cooling systems like cooling towers, and also for wastewater systems.
Okay.
We provide the chemicals as well as the expertise, technical expertise, and the machinery for handling water problems in this business segment.
I understand. So before we go into pencemaran or waterways, I want to jump in straight that ESG, I think has been a buzzword, I think, in the industry, maybe I would say 3 to 5 years.
Right.
Post-pandemic, we saw a lot of the drive towards ESG. We've seen in a lot of international forums, we see some agencies in our government also taking a lead into getting this ESG preparation. But what is ESG actually?
Now, ESG, as I think many people know, stands for environmental, social, and governance factors. Now, ESG are a bunch of non-financial disclosures that are aimed at letting investors, bankers, the government, your customers of companies, let them know your impact on the environment, on society, and the impact on your company itself or your organization itself.
So would you say that this is technically a scorecard?
Yes, it is a green report card or a green scorecard.
Okay, so when, how many countries have already now fully rolled this out?
Fully roll this out. Now, the word fully can be debated, but I think you should just look at our Southeast Asian counterparts, all our Southeast Asian counterparts in their main markets of their stock exchanges. They have already rolled out ESG for public listed companies on their main boards. Mandatory. They have made it mandatory for public listed companies on their stock exchanges in all the countries around Southeast Asia mostly to abide by ESG.
So is this scorecard an international standard, or it is like subjected to every country?
It is an international standard. Each country has their own norms and regulations. Like for example, in Malaysia, Bursa only requires Scope 3 emissions, something we'll get into later. They only require 6 out of 15 reporting criteria in the Scope 3. Other countries may be different, like Singapore, they may be far advanced, they may require more robust reporting for Scope 3. Other countries may be even less than us, other countries may be slightly more. So we all follow the same international standard, but how strictly we abide to everything in those standards is dependent on country.
I see. So there is some sort of certification for them, or there's an audit for an ESG. Does it exist?
Yeah, we have to get out of the way some words. There's ESG certification, there's ESG verification, and there's ESG ratings.
Okay.
Right.
So what's the difference between these three?
What's the difference? ESG certification, there are many people offering so-called certification. None of them are extremely stand up very much. But when it comes to ESG verification or third-party assurance, now this is what people want to see. People want to see your ESG report that was written by internal staff or by external consultants. They have to make sure the information inside the ESG reports is true and verified. That's what you get from third-party verification/assurance.
Understand. So these companies at the moment, which you said that they are listed in the stock market.
Yes.
So they have this scorecard. But
Right.
how does public get to see this scorecard?
It's very simple. You just go to the annual reports of these public listed companies,
Okay.
and they'll publish, together with the annual reports that are released every year. They'll also slip in now the ESG reports together alongside the annual reports. So for public listed companies, it's for the public to see. They can see everything.
Okay, so and these cards go by like percentage or report, or it is also broken down to the key segments of environmental one card, social one card, and governance one card, or it's all connected.
Now this depends on the standard or / format that the ESG report is written in. If the ESG report is written in GRI format, yes, you will get the E, the S, and the G in one card. If it's written in TCFD format, they may mash everything together and focus mostly on the E component of ESG.
Okay, so like, as you mentioned, I'm going to try to break the three.
Okay.
And then we're going to
Right.
discuss. But I'm going to start with environmental. The environment segment first, as that's one of your key subject interests at this point.
Right.
So, what we're looking at, as far as I know, I'm thinking about like waste. I'm thinking about carbon footprint as a layman.
Right.
Who sees this perspective. I'm seeing it much more of that global drama sometimes.
Right,
What's going on?
yeah.
So, what I don't know, please tell.
I don't blame you. A lot of people, when they think of ESG, they only see the E part of ESG. They forget about the S and the G sometimes. And if we're just talking about E, the most important thing, number one thing that you look in the E report card of the ESG report card is the emissions, carbon emissions,
Okay.
aka the greenhouse gas emissions, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. That's the most important. The other things under the E report card of ESG would be your energy usage, your water usage, your materials used to make your products, if any, and the waste produced when you make your products or your services, and also your effect on biodiversity loss. Now, these are the important aspects under the E of ESG.
Okay, so meaning to say that would some companies on the other side try to outsource this segment out? What happens if they outsource it? They try to make themselves look very clean, but they outsource all the dirt, the dust out to another country. For example, like we see always in all these international events that they say like, oh, the amount of energy required by China and India is way higher, and India and China don't want to comply with the amount of coal that they use. And then they say like, look, you are building all your factories in my country and then causing all of this demand and demand of energy and also waste.
That is a
Does this happen?
It does happen. I cannot say it doesn't. But hopefully, if ESG reporting gets more and more transparent, which is the name of the game, transparency, especially when you talk about the G of ESG, governance, it's all about transparency and accountability. Eventually, supply chains and value chains will become so transparent that you will be unable to hide. You're shifting all your aka your so-called dirty stuff, over to another country or to other companies, so that to make your own books look proper and clean, you cook the books by putting all the dirty stuff one side to another company or to another country. All of that will come out in the open if the transparency and accountability of the G of ESG gets bigger. Yeah, so you will be unable to hide eventually.
Understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so since you jumped to G, I'm going to bring you back to social.
Okay.
So social is going to be very complex. I see healthcare is going to be one of the social segments that we're going to look at, because you're going to see accountability of how we utilize hospitalization,
Right.
how we utilize beds, not just like becoming a hospital that is just using clean energy or using solar power and stuff. It's not enough to do that, because people have to start being accountable to their I wouldn't want to use the word social credit, it's very dangerous.
Okay.
But it will, I feel, materialize to a point to that direction. Like, look, if some companies are having 10,000 staff and all of them travel to a location by a single vehicle, or they don't carpool, or they do not use public transport, then they will have some sort of social impact, not just individually, because now at the moment it's always governing companies, but like it or not, that impact of social goes down to a man or woman down there at one point. It will somehow trickle to individuals. I see that's one segment. I see that as a burden on certain things. Example, consumption of food. Of course, someone who eats meat, they're going to say that, look, he's consuming, producing more methane now than a person who is vegan.
That's right.
So I like my meat.
Right.
So then I'm going to have a poor score somewhere. But then I said, look, I'll travel by train to work. So I'm going to compensate that. And there's also issues where we see these big billionaires who have fleets of and then they say that, look,
jet.
and there will be some people down there in some kampung who say, like, look, I'll sell my social credit to you. That will be possible, because there will be there's going to be a sort of like a taxation system, a trade-off. So look, I'm not going to fly for one whole year. Yeah, here's that. 1 ton of CO2.
Right.
I can buy it, because there will be some form of exchange. Because you see, if I can't eat that much meat because my score is going to get hurt, then I'm going to find some way how to compensate that, or buy that thing. That is what I see in terms of social. Not just that's the tip of the iceberg of social. I think more towards social is like, in a more dynamic situation like countries like Malaysia, you have certain laws that are placed. For example, like there is civil servants, a certain protection towards Bumiputra rights and things. And on the other side, let's pull ourselves to certain more liberal countries where there are issues like LGBTQ, and you're saying that, oh look, we need to get this much of Hispanics in the company. You need this much requirements. And these when if you say that there is some form of international standard, then everybody is stuck. Like, how do we work this now? Because one to another, it's going to be different. I want to hear from you, because you must be discussing this dialogue going on with the community.
There's a lot to unpack from what you just said. Firstly, I want to tackle the issue of DEI and how it relates in Malaysia. Now, in Malaysia, we all know we have the issue of the 3R. So we have to be mindful of our Malaysian subcontext, our cultural heritage, and so on. And in Malaysia, when you talk about DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion, we don't really talk about race. We talk about gender. Don't discriminate based on gender. Don't discriminate based on age. But when it comes to race, it's a bit touchy. So we don't talk about it in Malaysia. This is one of the things that define us as Malaysians, and that's how we differ in terms of the DEI standards as in Singapore or as in Thailand, or if we go far away, in the US, they're talking about giving quotas to hire LGBT people, hire Hispanic people, people of color especially, and people would go so far as to say they're discriminating against the white population. That's how extreme it is in the US. But on our side of Asia, we're not so extreme in the DEI, and we have our differences. Like Malaysia, we just talk about DEI in terms of age and gender, and that's fine, you know. And I want to unpack about what you said about the social credit score. Now, this is something that's scary. In everything, in every new phase, that something implemented by governments around the world, there's always the carrot and the stick approach. Now, if you look at the carrot approach, how to incentivize companies, organizations, and governments to take part in this ESG movement, you look at carbon credits. You incentivize companies to make new technologies, to make new processes that reduce carbon emissions and help fight climate change. That's the carrot approach. The stick approach would be to go to individuals, to go to companies and say, we're going to reduce your social credit score if you don't abide by our ESG standards. So there's a carrot and a stick approach. And hopefully they only stick with the carrot approach. But when talking about the stick approach, the social credit score, now this opens up a whole new can of worms into a dystopian society in the future, where in the future, if you misbehave or quote unquote, you think wrongly, and the government says, the big brother comes up to you and say, I think you've had too much to think. You know, you're not allowed to think independently. You're not allowed to join riots, to join peaceful protests against the government, for example. Otherwise, the social credit goes down, and you're not allowed to pollute the environment. It starts with polluting the environment. You're not allowed to pollute the environment. You're not allowed to do something contra to what ESG standards. You're not allowed to not abide by ESG standards, or your social credit will go down. Now, this is the stick approach that is scary, but I think we as a society need to fight for striking a balance between the two, you know. We can't go to the extreme of just only having carbon credits and nothing else, and we can't also have a social credit score system that hinders freedom.
True. When you mentioned that, when it's almost like going to the next one, which is governance, right?
Right.
So when you see governance, again, the position is the government is always interested to stay in power.
That's right.
One,
obviously.
so they don't want to give any form of room of negotiation. We saw that clearly during the pandemic, globally, whether it was much more liberal countries, they still used the stick approach.
Yes.
The oppression was obvious. We saw that even though there were many intellectuals discussing, debating about certain issues, which they will just say, follow the narrative.
Follow the science.
Follow the science. Oh, I am the science.
I think Dr. Fauci in the US, he said 6 feet apart. Everyone stands 6 feet apart.
Yeah, and
everyone just followed, but there's no science behind it.
Exactly. So you see when you discuss something like that, then you are called out. I mean, I personally I'm a victim of it, and I see that until today. It doesn't end, and there are many of us saw that some of them had no choice because they didn't have the capability to stand up. So they feel like, look, I have to just comply, do not negotiate. There's no form of discussion, negotiation. There's no a position of pro-choice on certain things, and we see that thing. So when I see that approach, whether it's going to be like this dystopian position that we're going to have, we don't want that. But we see the benefits of how this thing unifies a lot of segments. It's almost, I would say, a DeFi system. It's decentralizing the power, putting the power into sort of like almost like a blockchain position where everything is almost meticulously tracked. But like you said again, if there's a social score coming in and then they say, look, because you do this kind of job, you won't be able to get a loan. Or maybe a company that is maybe into manufacturing and their e-score is very, very bad.
Right.
And then they want to go up to scale up their company and get a loan.
I just want to say something about that. Firstly, I want to talk about what you said about government. When they gain power, it's very hard for them to give back that power. You know, when people give the government power,
we're going to hold it for 5 years.
Yeah, but when they want to take back the power, the government says, no, it's mine to keep. Now, I think that's the same for all governments in the world. Like you said, they want to stay in power. I agree totally. And the other thing that you mentioned, for example, banks nowadays, if you want to get a bank loan, you can get a bank loan. But if you have ESG criteria, banks are able to give you a much better loan with lower interest packages.
That if you comply.
If you comply with ESG, if you have ESG criteria and initiatives, and if there's now something called the CCPT, I think the climate change and principles taxonomy that banks abide by, they see your ESG risk. You as a company, if you are a high ESG risk, they cannot give you the ESG loan with 4% interest per annum over a 10 years. That's pretty good. Which the market rate is about 6, 7, 8% now to get a loan. And if you want that 4% interest loan, you've got to be CCPT 1, 2, or 3 at least.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got to the banks have to see you as a low risk for ESG to be able to give you that ESG loan. Now, in our current context, banks incentivize people to abide by ESG, get their ESG report card in order so that they can get these good loans. But in the future, I foresee that banks will only give loans to companies who have ESG criteria. Meaning now we have these things called ESG linked loans or sustainability linked loans, but in the future they will just be called loans. If you want a loan, you've got to have ESG. So that's the future.
Correct. And then I think that would trickle down to like which company that you work with as an individual. Now, do you qualify for the loan? Because if you are not you're not working in a company with a good ESG rating, that means you are contributing to.
Like if you're working with a coal mining company,
Exactly.
if you're a bank funding a coal mining operation, that's a no. Right?
Correct. So that's how deep actually the thing is. But I think the one more segment of the ESG which is going to come is, I think, the disruption of the tech itself. That means either it's going to be going into a disruptive module where it's going to be like almost like a blockchain module where everything has to be on a balance sheet. Because if not, it's going to be hard. Because, like you said, on one country, when you say, okay, look, Malaysia is going to look at 3R and stuff. Another country is going to look at the gender neutrality concerns. And if a company is in US and they have a scorecard of such, and then they have a crossover, they are MNC, they have multiple offices and centers and subsidiaries, and also like localized Sdn Berhads in different countries. It changes. It changes because the whole yardstick, the measurement, the requirement and criteria would flip. So like how do you see the company's position collectively? Because if I cross the waters, it's fine in another region, just across our border. But if you come here, the rules change. The SG, the dial just switches.
Okay.
So that fear brings me to like, if all of this goes into a DeFi system, then you will move to a one world management system.
Right.
You see where I'm coming.
Talking about one world management system,
or just straight one world government.
I'm getting flashbacks to George Bush Sr. talking about the need for a new world order, one world government. But I think that's another can of worms. To talk about what you mentioned earlier, I do believe that we have to strike a balance as a people to ask for a balanced system that will not only grant accountability to companies and organizations, but at the same time freedom to people. We cannot ask for accountability and from organizations and companies and strip away all the freedoms of individuals and companies and corporations at the same time. Like, for example, if you want everything to be on blockchain, to be totally transparent, for everyone to be able to see every transaction, the risk of that is that suddenly people, individuals and companies can be tracked and monitored by a centralized system. That's dangerous. And like, for example, later today I'm attending a session and it's by Bursa. This is something called the CSI by Bursa. It's a platform that allows companies, especially big companies like Petronas locally, to be able to track and monitor their suppliers and their supply chains to be able to accurately report on their Scope 3 emissions. And the danger of this is someone might say that they are watching you. If I'm the supplier or the vendor, I'd be worried, my big customer is watching me to see if I mess up in terms of ESG, and if they see me mess up,
they will pull out the contract.
That's right. I won't be able to supply as a vendor to Petronas anymore, for example.
But maybe that's the kind of accountability the world has to go, because you see, I think for me again, like looking back at the pandemic, is one of the biggest eye openers of accountability, because we saw decisions made because they could be made.
Right.
We saw a huge number of pharmaceutical products go down the drain because we can sign.
Right.
Then and when accountability was asked or raised in a parliament or in a senate debate, it's just like we'll just give you an answer that you like to hear, and then there's no accountability. So if systems like what you mentioned earlier come into place, of course you feel tracked, but sometimes I still feel that some form of tracking is necessary, because it creates accountability to look, this is your duty to make sure that you are sustainable towards the company. Like, why would you want to do business with criminals like that? It's almost to that point. Like, look, if you want to bribe a company, we could trace it.
Yeah, and that's one of the good things about ESG. It gives accountability and transparency, especially for investors. Investors know just by looking at the ESG report how well a company takes care of the environment, how well the company takes care of society, the society around the company, and how well the company's governance is of itself. So this gives peace of mind to investors, to shareholders, to the government and customers, that the company that they're investing in or working with or supplying to is a good company, making an impact, a positive impact on the world.
It's almost like, I would say, like a good self-policing.
Yes.
Yeah. So where do you see Malaysia in the next 5 years with ESG? How fast is it coming, or are we resisting it?
I think ESG is coming pretty fast from the people. My social circle, we're all talking about ESG. But I think the vast majority...
You only talk about ESG, I guess.
I'm in this line of business.
Exactly.
But the vast majority of lay people, of the general public, they have no idea what ESG is. But in the coming years, I believe more stringent efforts, more direct pushes from the government will be... Because by 2030, Malaysia has pledged to reduce our carbon intensity by 45% against our GDP. Now, we won't achieve that just by laying on the ground, doing nothing. So the government is going to push for more initiatives, more efforts, especially from the private sector.
How far are we now from the 45%?
I'd say we're on track. Yeah, I've asked this question and I've been told we are on track. But we will need more effort from the public sector, from private sector, public-private partnerships. And this will ensure that not only we achieve our 2030 targets, but also our 2050 target. Because by 2050, Malaysia has pledged in the Paris Agreement to be net zero. To be carbon neutral.
Okay, so I think at this moment there's a lot of initiative on the government side and also the corporate side.
Right.
But I think for public to actually start understanding this, I think public also has a lot of fear.
Right.
They fear this dystopian position and the loss of free will and choice.
I think that's a fair position.
Yeah. But yet again, choice also comes with a lot of consequences. I mean, like sometimes if you could choose to consume 2 boxes of tobacco, and you might get a slap with the ESG there.
Right.
You might get hit. So because you see, whatever you're going to contribute in sort of like syntax is sort of still going to impact your social or your governance impact on the other side. Whereas like environmental, like I said, what we use, what we consume towards the environment, the companies that you work with, all of this is going to impact that casing. So I think it will happen. The public will start to take note of it. But I think the initiative on government and corporate is they're going to, I think, play more of the soft entry first, slowly get people across the line.
Yeah, so I think the soft entry approach is the right one, because if it's like boiling the frog, if you turn on the heat too much, the frog will just jump. I think wrong analogy there, but what Bursa is doing, for example, is easing public listed companies into the process. They're not just asking public listed companies to comply everything ESG, do everything perfectly on day one. They're letting public listed companies test the waters with their ESG reporting. Their scope 3, like I said, they only need to report about 6 things out of 15, which is pretty easy. They chose the 6 easiest criteria for public listed companies to report on in their ESG reports so that they can comply. That's one example. And for the general public, I do believe that the awareness is growing, and by the time 2030 rears its head, I believe most of the general population would have at least heard of the term ESG, if not understood it quite deeply.
Okay. So once again, thank you, Dr. Kevin,
Right.
for being here on Lesung Batu Medic Show. I hope a lot of us learn a bit more on ESG today. I think I definitely did, especially on the environmental side, looking at a different thing, and also looking at how fast the technical impact of ESG is coming, and how we're going to get ready. Because I think getting ready is very important, because tech is going to be very fast, AI is going to be there, and different financial systems might come in. So all of this will all sort of like jive together.
Right, yeah, it's all coming at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so for those who tengah tonton, terima kasih kerana menonton Lesung Batu Medic Show. Thank you for watching Lesung Batu Medic Show today. Don't forget to like and subscribe us on Facebook, YouTube, and also TikTok. Till we meet the next time, kita lesung kau.